Just a little video. I made a game for my wife. She was a kids pastor a few years ago, and I made quite a few games for her. Made, like you can see on the sides here, it's a life-size battleship game that I made. And then you kind of see in the middle there, there's a Operation Ski Ball I made. We got that from a Carnival Cruise Line idea there. And original little wheel we made, like a Wheel of Fortune type wheel. That's kind of a blurry pick. And then I made a little bit bigger one later on. Um, just something to kind of do to occupy the kids a little bit. And then there's a match game. You have to find a matching picture on the left and right sides to be able to win that square. And then a Plinko game was really popular. The kids loved doing Plinko. But we kind of decided we wanted to look at something like the classic Connect 4. Obviously, we wanted to make it life size. My wife always said, the bigger the better. It just kind of gives the kids that awe effect when you see it. So there's the finished product. Kind of walk you through some of the stuff how I made it. It's only pictures, no video. But first thing we kind of did was pick our checkers, right? Because that kind of decides how big everything has to be. We found these at our local IKEA. You get 3 of them to a set, and I think they were $2.99, so it's about $1 per checker. They're just made of cork. It's kind of weird finding anything at IKEA you don't have to put together, but then again, we did have to spray paint them because they were just cork colors, so we turned it into red and black colors. Once we had the checkers figured out, we had to figure out the spacing for the game itself. So we had spacers, so we're going to put the spacers just far apart enough to allow the checkers to slide up and down, but not be able to move left and right. Here's kind of the original drawing I did to kind of lay out my spacing and understand how big of a board it was going to take and that type of thing. And started gluing my spacers down. I ended up coming back with a brad nailer and just putting a few nails in it to hold it together. But it just started off with some glue and clamps. Just typical type bond glue, and brush it on and get the clamps on there, and get the spacers on there, and get them down with clamps. And you'll see in a little bit, it's obviously, we've all heard the saying, you can never have too many clamps, and I think this is kind of proving that as I got into it. I could have obviously done a couple at a time and waited for them to dry, but I was trying to get this done fairly quickly. Excuse me. And then so after I started getting the spacers down, I had to just put some checkers in there, make sure the spacing worked out really well. On this next picture, you can see how much spacers, maybe an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch on each side, just enough for it to go up and down smoothly in the column, but not go too far left and right. Once I got the spacers put down, I went ahead and started marking where I was going to drill my holes. Now, I used a hole saw for this. The next picture shows the hole saw. I believe it was a 6-inch hole saw. The checkers were 7.5 inches, if I remember correctly. So that was kind of how my holes wouldn't be too big that the checkers came out, but they'd be big enough that, you could see the checkers really well. So I made my first row of holes, and man, that hole saw is a beating. If that thing locks up, feels like it's going to break your wrist. Went ahead and made another row up, and by this point I'm just like, oh my gosh, I got 42 of these to go. Thankful for the hole saw, definitely, but it is still a lot of work. I finally realized I could pre-drill where each with just a standard drill bit, making it easy, and then I just kind of dropped the hole saw bit in there and can get these done really quickly. Just kind of give you a few pictures there. I had planned on using a router to kind of round over the edges of all the circles, but I just kind of came back with sandpaper and smoothed it up a little bit. Didn't really want to spend as much time with the router to get that all done, but sandpaper seemed to knock the edges off, helped a lot. And here it is after I've cut all 42 holes. That's completely done. And again, just kind of showing the end. I cut the end off because, again, it didn't take the full 8 foot. I end up using that piece to fill in the back later. The back's multiple pieces. So there's my one piece with all the holes cut out. Now I'm getting prepared to put the back on. Again, start with glue. Just spread the glue out and start piecing the back together. I've made the back out of 3 pieces. Had a couple of spare pieces, and then one piece that was the cutoff from the front. Went on to make it, and I left a little room at the top. You'll see once we put it together. I got a logo I'm going to put on there. So now I'm going to glue the back pieces on. Again, it's all about clamps. You can never have too many of them, right? And actually, I do need some more in looking at that. And I kind of realized once I got this together, it wasn't as rigid as I wanted moving left to right. Obviously, the top and bottom was pretty rigid because I've got all the spacers in there, but I had nothing going, horizontal. So I added a couple of 2x4s on the back just to make it a little more stable. There's the entire thing after it's put together. And now I went ahead and decided I need to check each column to make sure that the checkers, so I filled up each column individually just to make sure the checkers fit in there fine and that they filled the hole correctly and everything looked good. That's exactly the look I'm wanting. Here's the whole thing laying down and getting ready for paint. Again, I did all this with a roller and a brush. This is before I had my HVLP. It would have been so much nicer to have a good sprayer just to get this done really quickly. So that's after the paint. And now here I'm starting to design how the checkers are going to stay in place, and then how I can slide this out of the way to let them drop. I didn't really know how I was going to do it, and I don't really like the look of that now that I see it. I did a horrible job of cutting that out. I know I was kind of frustrated at the point. I do remember that, so I just didn't do a very good job, but it's got some better pictures later. So now let's think about the legs. So to look back at the original Connect 4 piece and decided I need to have a kind of an upside down T for the legs, but with a curved inside. So I built a little, to draw the legs, I built a little, I guess I'll call it a jig, just with a simple stir stick from Home Depot. Screwed it into the board and then made a few holes so I could get it lined up exactly where I wanted it. And this just cuts the curve. And there's part of my leg piece. You'll see how it all connects up later. So I built a second one of those, and you'll see at the bottom I put casters on it. And you just have to. This thing was a beast. It was incredibly heavy, hard to move. The casters made it at least movable. If I had this to do over, like right here, I would have made these for the legs and the sides, just they bolt on and then come off with some kind of a nice little knob on the side, so I could just screw it in place and hold it. Here's another picture of how I have the drop mechanism. You see it holds the checkers in place until I pull it left or right, and then it drops the checkers. It actually worked really well. To me, it doesn't look good. I'm not at all happy with the way it looks, but it did function exactly correct. For some reason I have multiple pictures of this, but I wish I only had one or two because I'm not real happy with the way it turned out. But all right, and in this next picture after this, you're going to see where I put the leg pieces together. So I've got the boards down the side that connect to it, and now I'm going to put the little curved T-shapes there onto the side to build it. It turned into a very sturdy frame. It was very rigid. It wasn't at all going to tump over. And you can see how tall that is. Actually, once we put this piece together, I ended up taking the leg pieces back apart, and I think I cut another foot or maybe 2 feet off. You'll see in the final, it's quite a bit shorter than this initially. It's so tall right there. I mean, it's probably 7 feet tall. So at this point, I'm making the logo to go on the top. Went and bought some letters from like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, one of those kind of places. Spray painted them, put them on a board just to kind of give it something. Because again, I know the typical Connect 4 did not have a logo, but I wanted to add it, and there it is with the logo. I just glued it up and have it sitting there clamping up to dry. And there it is in use with all the checkers getting set up. And the next picture, you can actually see where some of the checkers have been dropped in just to get a good picture. Now again, all I did with this was simply take pictures. I didn't record any video. I've got a lot of these games. I'm going to do some of these videos. So if you would like to see me rebuild one of these games and take a ton of video and make a Connect 4 or make a Plinko game or whatever, just do me a favor. Like this video, comment on it. Of course, you're going to want to subscribe. That way when I make the video, you'll be able to see it, and you'll get if you hit the little alert bell there, you'll also get a reminder when it comes out. Whichever project most people want to see be the first one I make, and I'll go back and make a detailed video with detailed instruction. And anyway, thanks for watching. If you got any comments on anything, any questions, please comment. All right, thanks guys. Y'all have a good day.